everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. I'm Josh William here with Joel Boenitz. We're recording here on Tuesday afternoon. Joel, how are you doing? Have you caught your breath? Are you rested after Friday night? What a game.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I'm still trying to find all the words that I want to say to talk about it. I still remember watching the Friday Night podcast after my recap went up. Matt Rodwell was just like, "Hey, we need to have somebody check on him after the day after." But yeah, no, I think I can find the words to talk about that game. But yeah, it was a pretty good game. We'll just say that.
Yeah, I know there was another writer there, Michael O'Brien from the Sun-Times, and I think he might have tweeted it's the greatest comeback he's ever seen in a high school football game, and he's been doing this for quite a long time. So really tells you the kind of comeback it was for St. Charles North. And again, that game, it almost always delivers crazy moments. What'd you see? If I'm not mistaken, I think they scored a couple touchdowns and then the 2-point in the last minute. I mean, it had already been a pretty back and forth game up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, this battle was always really good, and it was pretty much, back and forth contest for a lot of the way. I mean, it was, St. Charles North got out in front first, and Batavia had a turnover, and then they got on the board with some pretty big plays. And by big, I mean 97-yard touchdown that got them into the lead. And then just continued to be a bit back and forth. The only time that it was a two-score game was after Batavia scored with 2:40 left on the clock. And the thing about it as well was that if they had just gotten the first down, would have secured the game for them. I talked to both coaches afterwards. Batavia's coach Dennis Puron, he kind of talked afterwards. Is like, that's a kind of a learning or that's something we definitely should have communicated to them at that point. And St. Charles North took full advantage of it. I mean, as soon as they got the ball back, they drove down the field. I believe they definitely converted a few fourth downs to get to that point. They scored with 42 seconds left on the clock. And then they decided that they had to go for the onside kick. And that's one of the good things about having a Division I kicker, and Lucas Tenbrock. He's really good at kicking those onside kicks, and it was executed perfectly. They got the ball on on Batavia's 45-yard line with 41 seconds left. They drove down the field, and with 9/10 of a second left, quarterback JT Padron found EJ Mondesir pretty much in the back corner of the end zone. He had to do a toe tapper for that touchdown, but got the touchdown. As there was basically no discussion afterwards. They knew they were going for the 2-point play. And it was kind of a broken play for the 2-pointer. Padron was kind of like looking all over the field after rolling to his left. He found Chris Acapete, who was originally a blocker on that play, kind of finding some open field in the middle of the field, going towards the end zone. He found him on the pass. He got the ball over the line, 2-point conversion, secured the 43-42 victory. I videoed that entire 2-point conversion play. As soon as I saw it go in, my mouth was just wide open. I couldn't believe what I saw. And pretty much everybody, all the other journalists there who had been doing this longer than I've been alive, were like, this is the best game I've ever seen. And I have to agree. I have much less experience, but definitely one of the best high school football games that I have ever seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, I saw that 2-point conversion, and man, that was such a great play by JT Padron. I mean, like you said, it was a broken play, pressure coming, and then he just throws a dart in the middle of the end zone, in the middle of traffic, for the 2-point conversion. I mean, what a great play by that kid to make something in that situation, to get the 2-point. And then a great call too. I mean, give credit to Rob Homizak for trusting his kids, for riding the momentum, for going for two. I know Matt Rodewald on our Friday night live streaming called him Riverboat Rob. Gamble and go for it. But I like it when a coach trusts his kids to make plays, with the game on the line, and they certainly delivered.
I think, somebody who definitely should deserve more flowers for the entire thing is Akapede. I mean, the thing that I didn't mention in my story that I definitely should have, earlier in that drive, he actually went down with an injury with 16 seconds left. He went into, or he like slid out of bounds, something like that. And as soon as he did, he started gripping his left leg, like his left knee area. I don't know if it was a cramp or anything like that. He was in there for the final two plays. And as soon as he realized that he could, get that score with, the two main options in that play being blocked, he made it. He made the catch. As soon as he got the touchdown, he had to lay down in the end zone for a bit because he was still injured.
Wow.
He laid down for a little bit. He didn't know if he got the touchdown or not until the offensive coordinator came over to him and was like, "Hey, you won the game for us." He limped off of the field, but he was like, "I just won the game." So gutsy effort from Akapede there, and one of many good efforts from those St. Charles North wide receivers in that game, or all of the wide receivers in that game for the most part. There was lots of passing yards that happened, and it was just an excellent offensive football game.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw two completely. It's like we weren't even watching the same sport last Friday. I'll get into that later. I'll get into my game later. But on the Batavia side, I mean, you mentioned that they could have just gone for the first down, not scored a touchdown, and the game's over. It's one of those tough situations that you see in every level of football when a team is up by a touchdown that, your just natural tendency is when you have a chance to score a touchdown, to get the touchdown, when a lot of times the smarter play is to just, take a knee after getting a first down. I know I covered a game earlier this year, Sandwich in Plano, where the Sandwich kid had sort of a breakaway. They were up by a touchdown. There was like a minute left and he just slid down, but he was in open field. But that's just, it's a smart play, but it's a hard play because you're not used to that. But I don't know, tough loss for Batavia. They've had a couple ones. You've been at both of them, that Glenbard West. I mean, they're like 2 plays away from being 5-0 right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think the big thing that we have to realize as well is like these kids are still high schoolers. They don't know everything about the game of football. Like, of course, kids that are playing at the Division I level or Division I level at college, or especially at the pro level. I mean, they're bound to make mistakes throughout, their career. And it's a tough learning experience for these kids, and it's one that they're going to probably take throughout the rest of this season. But it just puts even more fire underneath them for the rest of this season. They've got a few big games coming up for them, and if they want to make sure that they have a home game to start off the playoffs, they're going to need to show that they are the Batavia football team that has been averaging, 36 points a game and over 400 yards of offense throughout the first 5 games of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they'll be okay, but yeah, I mean, a couple tough losses. They got a big one this coming Friday. We'll talk about later, but yeah. So a great win for St. Charles North last Friday. There's a couple good wins for St. Charles teams last Friday. St. Charles East beating Wheaton North. I mean, not to take anything away from the Saints, but that was one of the more surprising results that I saw last Friday. Them able to beat Wheaton North. They able to snap that 8-game winning streak. So, big one for the Saints.
Yeah, it definitely is, especially since they're going to be heading into a rivalry game this week as well. I mean, I kind of talked with St. Charles East head coach Nolan Posley after the game. He just said it was just a complete all-around effort, which is something that, they've definitely needed because they've had a couple of key losses this year. The big one, of course, being their star running back, Xander Salazar, who went down with an injury in week 2. But I think the big story for them is the quarterback play that they've had throughout these past 4 weeks. They've had a sophomore at quarterback this year, Cruz Herrera, and he's put up some pretty solid numbers in those over these past 4 weeks. They got shut out against Lincoln Way Central to start the game, but he has 10 passing touchdowns over these last 4 games. So they've definitely been producing under him, and it definitely helps that they've had, some pretty good wide receivers in Shiko Jokai and Gavin Mateko kind of leading the way on the wide receiving core. But yeah, it's definitely a good confidence booster for the Saints, and it's definitely got to be a good sign, especially for the future for them.
Yeah, great win for them. At the same time, man, that's a tough loss for Wheaton North to take if they're going to be able to get back to the playoffs. I mean, that's one they probably are like, we really needed to win that game. So yeah, so good win for the Saints nonetheless. A game that I was at last Friday, a game that bore no resemblance to the football game that Joe was at. A couple 5-0 teams, Oswego and Yorkville. Yorkville came on top 16-6. Yorkville snapped Oswego's 14-game regular season winning streak. They're off to their best start since 2019, which happened to be the first year they were in that league. It's been a familiar pattern for Yorkville so far this year, Joel. I mean, their defense keeps them in the game, and then they take the lead in the second half and they go on to win. They played 5 games, and in 4 of them they've been tied at halftime. The 3 previous times it was 7-7. This time it was 0-0 at halftime. And nobody was moving the ball. There was 1 possession across midfield. There was 1 play of over 10 yards. I mean, you probably had that like in the last drive of your game. You probably had more than a one 10-yard gain. But very little offense on either side in the first half. But then Yorkville, to their credit, they forced 3 turnovers in the second half. They're able to turn them into points. And it's funny. I mean, they ran the ball in the second half 29 times. They only threw the ball twice. But the one of them was a big one. Their senior quarterback, Jack Beetham, threw a 57-yard touchdown pass to AJ DeVito for big score in that game. But yeah, I mean, Yorkville, they're doing it with defense. But I like how all 3 of their phases are coming together. Their defense does their thing. Their offense doesn't really make any mistakes, and when they get chances, they're able to take advantage of it. I mean, Jack Beetham's a pretty good senior quarterback. I think it's good to have a senior quarterback too. They have a good running back, TJ Harlan, who ran the ball 25 times or so for 100 or so yards last week. They're just doing a lot of good things, and they're quietly 5-0. They're the only 5-0 team left in that league. And I like their chances to run the table and to go 9-0 at this point, which if they do, it'll be the first time in, I think, close to 40 years since they've had a 9-0 regular season. So a lot of good things going on in Yorkville. And on the other side, Oswego, I mean, I picked them to win last week, but I don't think it's a bad loss to take. They have played 4 pretty much blowout wins the first 4 weeks. And I think being in a close game, it might've been a little bit of a shell shock. I think in the second half I was under sidelines and they were a little like, what's going on here? A lot of yelling back and forth, which it happens in a tough game. But, I think it's a good learning experience for them to lose 1 game.
I gotta agree. And I mean, of course, for Yorkville, this is easily their biggest win of the season. I mean, obviously Oswego coming in with a 14-game regular season winning streak. That's a big one to try and best. And I mean, to do that against, of course, reigning Southwest Prairie Conference champion, that's a really good sign for them. And I think that's, got to be the confidence booster that they need in order to make that big jump and maybe and hopefully run the table for them. And then, of course, for Oswego, you mentioned it, they haven't been in a lot of close games this year.
No.
It's a good learning experience for them. And, see if they bounce back next week.
Yeah, you could definitely tell which the teams have been in close games prior to that week, and Yorkville had, and they get another win. Another team that stays undefeated, Glenbard West. They continue to impress this year. They beat Lions. I think the final score is 24-17, but they are leading most of the way. Their running backs do their thing. Their quarterback does their thing. Their defense and man, just a lot of good things going on right now for Glenbard West. I mean, 5-0. I think they've established themselves as probably the favorite in that league, although a lot of things still to come in that league. So really good win for them. And then Nazareth, they played Joliet Catholic. It was a game that I had kind of circled as, be careful, Nazareth. Joliet Catholic is probably pretty desperate for a win. They must have been careful because they they took it. I think the halftime score was like 35-7 or 42-7.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. Failla, Failla. He's a transfer. He moved from Pennsylvania. Career high 6 touchdown passes, 4 in the first half. So a really good win for Nazareth last week, going on the road, beating Joliet Catholic.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a really good feeling knowing that you can have that big of a victory against, a team that you faced in the state championship game 2 years in a row. So it's definitely a good sign for them. Not as good as the sign for Mount Carmel, or not Mount Carmel, Joliet Catholic, who desperately needed it, especially with, of course, Mount Carmel in the future, as well as teams like Providence. But, that's definitely a good sign for that Nazareth team, especially after what happened to them last week.
No doubt about that. I think we're going to take a quick break, hear from a word from our sponsors, and then we'll look ahead to week 6.
I'm State Representative Steve Reich. Since 2017, I've led the fight to reform our child welfare system and supported educational choice for every kid in Illinois. I've worked to stop the collapse of our public pensions while standing up for businesses that are being crushed by crippling mandates. And I've never forgotten who pays the bill. The work isn't finished, and as I run for re-election, I'm asking for your support. I'm Steve Reich, and I approve this message.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brinton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike, with dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country. We meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Back on the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast. And Joel, we look ahead to week 6, and that would mean rivalry week in the Duquesne Conference. And we'll start with Batavia and Geneva. God, I don't know how many times they've met now. It's quite a few. Let's put it that way. I'd have to go back and check on that one. But Geneva, it feels like their offense has kind of got back on track after they kind of, were running in neutral for a couple weeks and losses to St. Charles North and Oswego. They've been able to put up the points pretty good the last couple weeks to get a couple wins. Batavia on their side, tell you what, there will be no problem motivating that team in practice this week after the way they lost at St. Charles North game, and also the fact that Geneva beat them last year for the first time in over a decade.
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm this is going to be the 107th football game between these two teams, and it's been something that's been happening for the past 112 years. Wow. So, it's a long rivalry. It's not like Sandwich Plano level yet, but it's definitely getting to that timeline there. But both of these teams, both 3-2. Pretty different 3-2 teams, though, I must say. Obviously Geneva has been on the up, especially after those tough losses to Oswego and St. Charles North. And I think the big thing about them that isn't getting talked about enough is how good their defense has been this year. I mean, through 3 Duquesne Conference games, they've only allowed 34 points, and it's not like they've, had a cakewalk schedule. They allowed 10 points to St. Charles North, They held Wheaton Warrenville South to 7 points, and the most points they gave up was last week to Lake Park. And a lot of those came in the fourth quarter. So they've had some really good games on defense, which is pretty much a stark contrast to last year, where, of course, their big thing was the offense. And then, of course, we talked about Batavia earlier. Their offense has been really good this year. So it's going to be, a battle of, who's better is pretty much best. And it's going to be, it's all going to come down to who's going to execute the best game plan when it comes to that night. You mentioned how Batavia is going to have, that motivation to, bounce back after their tough loss last week. And then, of course, the loss last year to snap the 13-game winning streak that they had against Geneva. And, of course, Geneva is going to want to start their own streak or their own winning streak and do it at home at best. So I'm really interested to see who comes out on top in this game.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that Geneva defense has been really good. It's going to be put to the test against that Batavia offense because I know they lost last week, but they're really putting up the points. I mean, they got a great quarterback. They appear to have a lot of weapons around them. Obviously, those two running backs have had some big games for Batavia. So should be a fun one that you're going to be at on Friday, Batavia and Geneva. Another rivalry matchup in the Duquesne Conference, St. Charles North, St. Charles East. Both of them coming off of great wins. And you had reference in your notebook this week, going to be a little bit of a homecoming for the St. Charles North quarterback, JT Padron, coming off, I'm just going to say, probably the best game of his high school career. And now he goes home to St. Charles East, where he transferred from East to North this season. Going to be a lot of emotion there, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure he's not going to get the most welcome homecoming crowd, is my guess. But yeah, you mentioned it. I mentioned it as well. Both of them coming off of some pretty great wins in week 5. Both of them are kind of on a different trajectory, of course. St. Charles North 5-0, looking to go 6-0 and potentially run the table for the first time since 2022 when they went 9-0 to end the season, or when they went 9-0. Of course, St. Charles East, if they get a victory, that's kind of a big statement for them. Well, not kind of a big statement. That is a very big statement for them if they get that victory. So, I'm interested to see if they can keep up with that St. Charles North offense, and I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that St. Charles North offense is clearly, humming pretty good, and they got a pretty good defense to boot as well. So yeah, we'll see. Another big one in Duquesne Conference. I mean, Wheaton North and Wheaton Warrenville South. It feels like sort of like a swing game, playoff wise. I mean, Wheaton South comes in 3-2, Wheaton North 2-3, coming off that loss to St. Charles East. I think this is, it's a very important game, be it's a rivalry game and in conference. But man, I think Wheaton North, they probably feel like they really need to get this one because they still got some tough games ahead in the conference.
Yeah, I think Wheaton North is thinking that. I'm thinking Wheaton Warrenville South is thinking the exact same thing. Because Wheaton Warrenville South, if they lose this game, they've got St. Charles North next week, and then and then if they win their week 8 matchup, it all comes down to, can we beat Batavia can we beat Batavia in week 9? And I wouldn't want to put money on that. I'm not a gambling man, but I definitely wouldn't want to face Batavia in week 9. And of course, Wheaton North, we talk about it. They have 4 or if they lose that game, they have 4 losses on the season. And, they've still got a tough couple of games to finish out the season. So this is a very crucial game for both of these teams if they want to reach their playoff aspirations. And, I'm sure this will definitely be a very interesting game for both of these teams.
No doubt. Game that I'm going to be out on Friday night. IC Catholic Prep is going to be at St. Francis. Looking forward to this one. I mean, it's a game that I've never covered personally, and I've always wanted to. It's a big rivalry. It goes back several conferences, I feel like. And now it's in the Catholic League. I think it's 2 rivals that I think there's a little bit of edge to this rivalry. And they're both pretty good teams. I mean, IC Catholic did not make the playoffs last year. They look like they are well on the way to a potential return to the playoffs this year. Got a good junior quarterback, Nate Lang. He's got some kind of young talent surrounding them. Foley Calcagno is a really good senior they have. and St. Francis coming off of a really good win last week at Providence. Of course, their quarterback, a lot of good receivers with Nate Washington going to Michigan State, or Zach Washington rather, going to Michigan State. So should be fun. I'm expecting a lot of points. I'm expecting a close one down to the wire.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I mean, Brock Phillip for St. Francis has been really good for them, over these first 5 games for them. Obviously, putting up 47 points against Providence is definitely a good sign. And, IC Catholic, they've only lost by 4 points, throughout or in their in back-to-back losses. Obviously, they lost on a game-winning field goal to Nazareth 2 weeks ago, and then they lost by 1 point to Marist last week. So they're definitely going to be, coming out guns a-blazing, hoping that they can get a victory, get back in the win column, and hopefully not be a 16 seed whenever it comes to the seedings.
This will also be my first game covering St. Francis on their blue turf field. I'm very curious how I am going to deal with watching a football game on blue turf for 4 quarters. I know I went out to their practice earlier in the year after Brock Phillip was our Friday Night Drive Team of the Week MVP. But I'm looking forward to it. Let's put it that way, to watch those 2 teams play on that blue turf on Friday night. Another good one in DuPage County, York and Hinsdale Central. Hinsdale Central's had some really good. I mean, they've had a great start to the year. They had that big win over Alliance a couple weeks ago. They followed it up by beating Downsgrove South last week, put a ton of points on the board. Their quarterback Riley Contreras is playing great for them. And they're playing well. York, I know we've talked about it on the podcast. I talked about it on a previous podcast with Seuss as well. They've played such a weird schedule this year. They lost that overtime game to Glenbrook South in week 1. And then it's almost like they kind of went into hiding a little bit the last 4 weeks, because they've played really the soft part of their schedule the last 4 weeks, and obviously won pretty handily in all 4 of those games. But now they got really the teeth of the schedule coming up with Hinsdale Central. Then they still got Glenbard West. They got Lions. They got Downers North. We're going to find out a lot more about York the next 4 weeks. I think they have a really good team, but we're going to see it bear out the next few weeks. So really curious to see what we're going to see out of York playing Hinsdale on Friday.
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be a great first test for York throughout, of course, these final 4 weeks to end the season. I mean, Hinsdale Central has definitely been on the rise this year. And, you obviously mentioned Riley Contreras. They've also had some pretty good running back performances as well. I mean, last week it was Patrick Connors who rushed for over 150 yards. And then you also have, who's the other one? I believe it's Dominic Tressler, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he had the big touchdown a couple weeks ago against
the big go-ahead one against Lions. So they've got weapons all throughout, their rosters. So this is definitely going to be a really good test for York to see if they're at that same caliber that they were last season, whenever, of course, they made it all the way to the 8A state final. So really good test for them, and really good test for both of them, I'd say.
Yeah, one more game, in DuPage County in the Catholic League, back in the Catholic League, that I'm curious about is Montini is going to be going up to Mundelein to play. I forget, is it Carmel or Carmel? I never know how to pronounce that school's name. But anyway, Carmel is coming off of, they just dropped 70 points against Marion Catholic. They got the quarterback Trey Taylor that's going to Nebraska. Of course, Montini has Izzy Abrahams, uncommitted, one of the best quarterbacks in the state. Montini's undefeated, but this could be Montini's toughest test the regular season, going on the road to a Carmel team with a really talented quarterback.
Yeah, it's going to be a battle of 2 really extremely talented quarterbacks. So it's going to be, I'm sure it's good. It's probably going to be high scoring. If it's low scoring, I'm sure everybody's going to be surprised. But yeah, no, it's going to be a really good test for Montini, and also a really good test for Carmel. So it's going to be interesting to see which quarterback comes out on top.
No doubt. Any other games that you're kind of keeping an eye on Friday that we haven't gone over?
Well, one I'm kind of looking at, kind of in this different direction whenever, or kind of more on the western side. Looking at Interstate 8, I'm looking at Caneland and Sycamore. That game should be pretty interesting. Caneland, of course, kind of coming off of a tough loss to Morris. Their big thing about that game, though, was that they were without quarterback Jalen Carter for a good majority of that game. I think he only had 2 rushes, and they had the backup quarterback in for all of the passes. So I'm really interested to see if he comes back for that game. And if he does, I feel like it's going to be a really intense battle between these two teams. And it's going to be a good test to see, obviously they weren't able to beat Morris last week, but if they beat Sycamore, that's still a pretty big statement for them.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, obviously it would help to get Jalen Carter back, full status. He's been such a huge part of their success in early on this year. And, we kind of wondered how they do against Morris. That was their first, sort of, let's see how good they are in the conference. Obviously it didn't work out, but they get another big one this week with Sycamore. So yeah, we'll see. Big game for the Knights on Friday. A lot of good stuff coming up on Friday. You're going to have that big Batavia Geneva game. Like I said, I'll be at St. Francis. We'll be covering tons of games this weekend. I alluded to my podcast with Seuss is up. We have Russell Hodges on as well. And then Seuss will be recording the Kankakee podcast with Mason Schweizer, and then of course JT Peddledy and Eddie Criffio. Their South and West podcasts, I have alluded to it being one of the more entertaining listens out there. And then Seuss will be back on Friday night with Matt Rodewald for our Command Center live stream. We're going to get out of here. Again, for Joe Boenitz, this is Josh Welge. Everybody have a great week and a great week 6.